Hi, Jonathan York, Bay Financial Partners, looking at the investment markets. Potentially a little bit of a blip in the US economy with the latest round of inflation data. CPI was okay, but the PPI, the wholesale prices side, that was just a tad higher. Now, obviously, the big question is now: is this just a blip, or is it a more worrying sort of trend of inflation reverting back to an upward path? Now, most analysts still expect the Fed to be cutting interest rates by quarter point in December because it looks like the data coming through in November will be a little bit weaker on the inflation front on both sides. But then the big question is if you do see a further quarter point cut from the Fed in December, given the market's reaction to Trump's re-election to the White House, with potentially his policies being inflationary and also as well increasing the deficit as well. So that's seen 10-year up at, it was above 440, but currently 438, and the 2-year is 428. Now, again, if you look at those over the last sort of 2 to 3 weeks, they're up around 50 basis points. Now, also as well, we've seen comments from the Fed, and most notably Fed Chair Jay Powell, coming out and saying actually there's no real rush for the Fed to cut interest rates because the US economy is actually pushing on at a pretty good rate. You've got reasonable growth, you've got a little bit of a rise in unemployment, but that was expected. And with US growth around sort of 2.3, 2.4% on an annual basis, that's pretty encouraging, and certainly nowhere near the sort of recessionary worries that was plaguing the market at the early part of the year. Now, obviously, the other big talking point, Trump's potential cabinet nominations. Now, most notably, Matt Gaetz, who's Trump has put up for Attorney General, he's facing an ethics investigation about inappropriate relationships. Also, as well, he's looking at putting up RFK Jr. for health secretary. It's well known about his sort of skepticism on vaccines and fluorides, etc. The other big news has been the Ukraine-Russian conflict as well, with Russia launching one of its largest missile attacks on Ukraine. So much for the call from Trump to Putin to ask him to calm down the aggression. But also as well, it looks like Ukraine has now got permission to use longer range US missiles on direct attacks into Russian territories. Now, quite what Putin will make of this is yet to be decided. Now, oil has backed off its recent lows. It was as low as sort of 67 and change, currently around sort of 68.50. And it's just going to be interesting to see how that does trade going into the Northern Hemisphere winter. Now, in the UK, a bit of a mixed picture on the GDP. September was down 0.1%, but the actual quarter was just a minor growth of 0.1%. So, in all intents and purposes, it's flatlining. As you head into winter, the first sort of bad weather has come through with snow hitting the UK. Just going to be interesting to see how the economy does perform, because certainly, those rate cuts from the Bank of England haven't really impacted the economy yet. But certainly there's further rate cuts needed as well. Now, in the EU, obviously, still nervous about Trump and what his potential sort of tariff policy does for EU trade, but also as well, obviously, heading into those winter months as well. Energy does become a key sort of component out there. So far, prices aren't getting too exaggerated. And the EU seems to have found alternative sources for the gas that was coming from Russia. Now, the Australian economy is still a little bit sluggish out there. Obviously, you haven't seen any benefits from any rate cuts from the Reserve Bank, and probably not likely to until sort of February or March of next year. But certainly, housing markets picking up, especially in sort of Brisbane and sort of Queensland, also New South Wales as well. But still pretty sluggish in Victoria. But Southern and Western Australia, again, the sort of local economies there are doing reasonably well. Now here in New Zealand, inflation is still sort of falling out there, and the Reserve Bank is still expected to cut rates by 50 basis points next week, if not 75. We just discussed here before, after the November meeting, the next meeting isn't until mid-February 2025. And certainly the economy is pretty sluggish out there. Again, the recent rate cuts haven't really impacted yet because a lot of the mortgages haven't been reset. But on the plus side, tourist numbers are starting to get pretty close to sort of pre-pandemic levels now. I mean, the good news from Fonterra last week as well, in terms of the slight increase on the dairy payout. The New Zealand economy is showing a little bit of optimism out there, but still coming from a very low base. So if you are looking for income options, go to the website www.bayfinancialpartners.co.nz for lots of interesting articles, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.